The space station called Harmony's Promise floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was old and large, built by species that no longer existed, and now it served as the training ground for the Galactic Defense Initiative. Young soldiers from 27 different species came here to learn how to protect the Confederacy from the many dangers that lurked in the void. Commander Velthrix stood at the front of the teaching hall. He was a Kethrani, which many looked something like a giant insect standing on two legs. His body was covered in hard shell that shone with blue and green colors when the light hit it. He had 6 arms, compound eyes made of thousands of tiny lenses, and mandibles that clicked together when he spoke. He had fought in 3 wars and watched many soldiers die. Now he taught the young ones so they might live longer than his old comrades had. The seats rose up in half circles before him, filled with beings of every shape and size. There were the Drexy, small and furry with large ears that could hear a whisper from 100 meters away. There were the Florani, beings made of glowing gel that could reshape their bodies at will. The Vrethkai sat in special cold tanks because they came from an ice world and would die in normal temperatures. The Morth were there too, tall and thin with skin like gray stone and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their flat faces. And in the back row, sitting alone with empty seats on either side of her, was the human dot. Her name was Elena Vasquez. She was 24 years old, born on Earth in a place called Argentina, raised on a farm where her grandmother grew vegetables and kept animals. She had brown skin, dark hair pulled back in a tight knot, and eyes that were almost black. She sat very still, watching everything, and the other cadets had learned to stay away from her without understanding why. It was something about the way she moved. Too quiet, too smooth. When she walked, her footsteps made almost no sound. When she turned her head, her eyes locked onto movement faster than seemed right. The Drexy, with their sensitive hearing, said they could hear her heartbeat, slow and steady like a hunting animal waiting in the grass. Velthrix began his lecture. Today's subject was xenotoxicology, the study of poisons and venoms from across the galaxy. Every species had their own dangers, their own chemical weapons that evolution had given them for defense or attack. A good soldier needed to know these things. A living soldier needed to know them better. The galaxy is not a safe place, Velthrix said, his mandibles clicking around each word. Every world has developed its own methods of killing. Today, we will study some of the most dangerous toxins known to our Confederacy. Pay attention. This knowledge may save your life. He pressed a button on his control panel, and the holographic display came to life. A small creature appeared floating in the air above the projector. It was fuzzy, with a round body covered in yellow and black stripes. It had wings that blurred with motion and large dark eyes. At the end of its body was a sharp point, a stinger connected to a small sac of liquid. This, Velthrix said, his voice becoming grave, is a Terran creature called Apis mellifera. In the human common tongue, it is known as a honeybee. The cadets leaned forward to look. The creature seemed small, almost cute to some of them. But Velthrix had taught for many years, and he knew that the most dangerous things often came in small packages. Do not let its size fool you, he continued. This creature carries one of the most effective toxins ever discovered. The venom, called apatoxin, is delivered through the stinger apparatus here. The hologram zoomed in, showing the barbed stinger in detail. Once injected, the toxin attacks the victim at the cellular level. It destroys cell membranes, triggers massive immune responses, and causes rapid system failure. Death follows within moments for most galactic species. A nervous sound rippled through the audience. The Florani delegate, whose body was made of sensitive gel, began to quiver. The Drexy pulled their ears flat against their heads. Even the stone-skinned Morth shifted uncomfortably in their seats. 7 years ago, Velthrix said, A diplomatic mission from the Drexy homeworld visited Earth. They landed in an area filled with flowering plants, not knowing the danger. A swarm of these creatures attacked the landing party. 16 Drexy were killed before the humans could intervene. The toxin worked so fast that there was no time for treatment. They died in screaming agony while their cellular structure collapsed. The room was very quiet now. Every cadet understood that this was not a game. The galaxy was full of things that wanted to kill them, and some of those things were smaller than a fingertip. The humans keep these creatures on their planet, Velthrix continued. They exist in the millions, perhaps billions. They build homes in trees, in walls, in the ground. They fly from plant to plant, and they will attack anything they see as a threat to their colony. Earth is considered a Class 4 hazardous world, partly because of this species alone. He let the information sink in. The cadets stared at the hologram with new eyes, seeing not a fuzzy creature, but a tiny flying death machine. Then a hand rose in the back of the room. Velthrix focused his compound eyes on the source. It was the human, Elena Vasquez, her arm raised casually like she was asking about homework. Yes, Cadet Vasquez? He asked. Commander, I have a question about the toxin. Proceed. Elena lowered her hand and shrugged in that strange way humans did, moving her shoulders up and down like it meant something. Back there. On Earth, we name that a honeybee prick. Or a sting. It is not really something we worry about too much. The silence that followed was so deep that Velthrix could hear the environmental systems humming in the walls. Every eye in the room, every sensory organ capable of focusing, turned to look at the human. I'm sorry, Velthrix said slowly, checking his translator to make sure it was working correctly. Could you repeat that? You are saying that this toxin, this lethal chemical weapon, is not something your species worries about? It hurts, Elena said, as if this explained everything. It hurts for maybe an hour, and the area gets red and swells up a bit. But mostly you just scrape out the stinger, put some ice on it, and go back to what you were doing. Kids get stung all the time. It is like a normal part of growing up. The Florani delegate made a wet, horrified sound and collapsed into a puddle on their seat. Velthrix stood very still. In his many years of teaching, he had seen many things. He had seen soldiers die bravely and die screaming. He had seen weapons that could crack moons and plagues that could empty worlds. But he had never, not once, heard anyone speak of apatoxin exposure like it was nothing more than a minor annoyance. He looked at the human sitting calmly in the back row. And for the first time in his long career, Commander Velthrix felt something very close to fear. The teaching hall had become very quiet. Every cadet sat frozen in their seat, staring at the human in the back row. The Florani delegate had pulled itself back together into a shaking pile of gel, but it had moved 3 seats further away from where Elena Vasquez sat. Velthrix clicked his mandibles together slowly, a sound that his species made when they were thinking hard about something. His compound eyes stayed fixed on the human, studying her face for any sign that she was joking. Humans did that sometimes. They said things that were not true because they found it funny. But Elena's face was calm and serious, like she had simply stated an obvious fact. Cadet Vasquez, Velthrix said, keeping his voice steady. I want to make sure I understand you correctly. Are you telling this assembly that members of your species survive exposure to apatoxin? Survive? Elena tilted her head to one side, looking confused. Commander, most of us do not even go to a doctor for it. It just swells up, itches for a day or two, and then it is fine. My little cousin got stung 3 times last summer when he stepped on a nest. He cried for about 10 minutes, we put some cream on it, and then he went back to playing. A Drexy cadet made a high-pitched sound of distress. His species had lost people to these creatures. He had attended memorial services for diplomats killed by bee stings. And this human was talking about it like it was nothing more than a scraped knee. "That is not possible," the Drexy said, his voice shaking. "The toxin attacks at the cellular level. It destroys tissue. It triggers cascade failure in the immune system. You cannot simply put cream on it." Elena looked at him with something like sympathy in her dark eyes. "I am sorry about your people," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "I read about that in the news when I was young. It was very sad. But humans, we have been living with bees for thousands of years. Our bodies learned to handle the venom a long time ago." Velthrix walked slowly toward the human seat, his 6 arms folded behind his back. The other cadets moved out of his way, pressing themselves against their seats as he passed. He stopped at the end of Elena's row and looked at her with all his thousands of eye lenses. "Show me," he said. "Show you what, Commander?" "You said your cousin was stung 3 times. You spoke as if you have personal experience with this. Show me proof." Elena shrugged again and rolled up the sleeve of her uniform. Her forearm was muscled from years of farm work, the skin brown and smooth. But there, near her elbow, was a small pale mark. It was circular, slightly raised, about the size of a small coin. "I got this when I was 6 years old," she said. "I was in my grandmother's garden, running around without shoes. I stepped on a bee by accident. It stung me right here." She touched the scar gently. "I remember I screamed very loud because it hurt a lot. My grandmother came running, pulled out the stinger with her fingernails, and carried me inside. She put ice on it and gave me sweet tea. By dinner time, I had forgotten about it." Velthrix stared at the scar. It was real. This was genuine evidence of toxin exposure that should have killed her, should have dissolved the tissue of her arm and spread through her bloodstream until her organs shut down. Instead, it had left a mark no worse than a scratch. "This is very old," he said quietly. "Almost 20 years. Yes, I have been stung maybe 4 or 5 more times since then. You stop counting after a while. Everyone I know has been stung at least once. It is part of life on Earth." The teaching hall erupted in noise. Cadets were talking over each other, their translators struggling to keep up with dozens of languages spoken at once. Some were afraid. Some were confused. The Morth were arguing among themselves in their rumbling stone voices about whether the human was lying. Velthrix raised 2 of his arms, and the room fell silent. "I think," he said slowly, "that we need to revisit our understanding of human biology. Cadet Vasquez, please come to the front of the room." Elena stood up and walked down the steps between the seats. The other cadets pulled away from her as she passed, pressing themselves against the backs of their chairs. She did not seem to notice, or if she noticed, she did not care. She moved with that strange, quiet grace that had made everyone nervous from the first day. When she reached the front, Velthrix activated a new holographic display. This one showed a human body, transparent so that the internal organs were visible. "I have taught at this academy for 30 years, Velthrix said to the class. "In that time, I have learned much about many species. But I admit that I have not studied humans as closely as I should have. They are a young species, newly arrived in the Confederacy, and we have treated them as, well, as fragile. They have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. They cannot survive in vacuum. They cannot see in the dark. We assumed they were soft." He looked at Elena, who stood calmly beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. "I am beginning to think we were very wrong." He turned to the display and highlighted the human circulatory system. "Cadet Vasquez, if I may ask, what other toxins are you exposed to on your homeworld?" Elena thought about it for a moment. "There are many kinds of bees and wasps. Hornets, they are bigger and angrier. There are spiders, too. Some of them can give you a bad bite. Snakes. Some of them are venomous. Scorpions in the desert areas. Certain plants will make your skin itch and burn if you touch them. Jellyfish in the ocean can sting you very badly. Some fish are poisonous if you eat them wrong, but some people eat them anyway because they think it is exciting. The class was utterly silent. And you survive all of these? Velthrix asked. Most people do, most of the time. Some are more dangerous than others. The box jellyfish can kill you if you are not careful. Some snake bites need medicine very fast. But humans have been finding ways to survive these things for millions of years. It is just, how do you say it, natural selection. The ones who could not handle the poison died, and the ones who could handle it lived and had children. Velthrix turned back to the class. Every face, every sensory organ was fixed on the human standing beside him. Class, I want you to understand something. This woman comes from a planet where the water is filled with acid that would burn through Florani tissue. The air contains a gas, oxygen, that is corrosive to most metallic life forms. The ground is crawling with things that bite and sting and poison. And her species did not just survive there. They thrived. They became the dominant life form. They built cities and machines and eventually came to the stars. He paused to let this sink in. The honeybee, the creature I showed you today, the one I warned you could kill you in moments, is so harmless to humans that their children are stung regularly and consider it normal. They keep millions of these creatures near their homes on purpose, because the bees make a sweet food that humans enjoy eating. A Vrethkai cadet raised a tentacle from its cold tank. Commander, are you saying that humans farm these deadly creatures for food? Yes, Elena said simply. My grandmother kept 12 hives. The honey was delicious. Velthrix looked at his teaching materials and his carefully prepared lectures about the dangers of the galaxy. Suddenly, they all seemed somewhat inadequate. I think, he said, that tomorrow we will begin a new unit. We will study not the dangers of the galaxy, but the dangers of Earth. It seems we have much to learn about our human colleagues. He looked at Elena Vasquez, standing calm and quiet beside him, a creature forged by a world that seemed designed to kill everything on it. Much to learn indeed. The weeks that followed changed everything at the academy. Commander Velthrix had thrown away his old lesson plans and started fresh. He spent long nights reading human medical texts, biology reports, and something the humans called survival guides that described how to live through encounters with various Earth creatures. The more he read, the less he slept. The less he slept, the more he read. His new course was not about the dangers of the galaxy. It was about the dangers of Earth, and every lesson was more terrifying than the last dot today. The holographic display showed a molecular structure, a complex arrangement of atoms that looked almost beautiful in its symmetry. The cadets sat in their usual seats, but now they all watched Elena Vasquez in the back row with nervous eyes. They had learned that whenever Velthrix showed something new, the human would raise her hand and say something that made everything worse. This compound is called capsaicin, Velthrix announced. It is produced by certain plants on Earth as a defense mechanism. When it comes into contact with tissue, it triggers intense pain receptors. The burning sensation is so severe that it can cause temporary blindness, respiratory distress, and complete loss of motor function. Security forces across the galaxy have studied it as a potential weapon. He paused and looked at Elena. Her hand was already rising. Yes, Cadet Vasquez? We put that on food. Commander. The Drexy cadet, who sat 3 rows ahead of her, made a sound like a small animal dying. You put it on food, Velthrix repeated flatly. Yes, it is called hot sauce or salsa or chili. Many different names. My grandmother, she made this salsa with peppers from her garden that would make you sweat and cry. But it tasted so good on eggs in the morning. Some people compete to eat the hottest peppers they can find. They film themselves doing it and put the videos on our communication networks. Other people watch and laugh. Velthrix added this to his growing file of human insanity. The file was becoming very large. "Let me understand this," he said slowly. "Your species takes a compound that causes severe pain, applies it to your food, and then eats it for enjoyment. Some of you do this competitively. Yes, there is a pepper called the Carolina Reaper. It is the hottest one. People cry when they eat it. Sometimes they vomit. But they keep doing it anyway because they want to prove they can." The class sat in stunned silence. The next lesson was about ethanol. Velthrix showed them the molecular structure and explained that it was a solvent capable of dissolving organic tissue. It damaged the nervous system, impaired judgment, and in sufficient quantities could shut down major organs. "Humans drink this recreationally," he said, and he did not even wait for Elena to raise her hand. "They have been doing so for at least 10,000 years. They make it from fruits, from grains, from potatoes, from anything they can ferment. They gather in large groups to drink it together. They celebrate important events by drinking it. They mourn sad events by drinking it. Some humans drink it every single day." A Morath cadet raised a stone hand. "Commander, you are saying they poison themselves on purpose? Regularly?" "Yes, they call it beer, or wine, or vodka, or whiskey. There are hundreds of variations. They have entire industries built around creating and selling this toxin. Some bottles of it are worth more than a small spacecraft." Elena nodded from the back row. "My grandfather made his own wine. He was very proud of it. He said the trick was letting the grapes ferment just long enough, but not too long." The Morath cadet put its head in its hands. The lesson after that was about theobromine. It was a compound found in something called cocoa beans, and it was lethal to most carbon-based life forms. It affected the heart, causing rapid and irregular beating that could lead to death. "Humans extract this compound," Velthrix said, his voice now carrying a note of exhaustion. "Process it with sugar and fat and form it into solid shapes. They call it chocolate. They eat it constantly. They give it to each other as gifts during romantic courtship. There are shops dedicated entirely to selling it." A Florani delegate, one who had recovered from the first day's shock, bubbled a question. "How much of this chocolate must a human eat before it harms them?" Velthrix checked his notes. For a human, a lethal dose would require eating approximately 5 kilograms of dark chocolate in a short period. For a Vrethkai, less than 50 grams would cause cardiac arrest. "I once ate a whole box of chocolates during a sad movie," Elena offered helpfully. "Maybe half a kilogram. I felt a little sick afterward, but mostly just happy." The Vrethkai cadet in its cold tank began making distressed bubbling noises, but the worst lesson was about caffeine. Velthrix had saved this one because he knew it would break something in his students' minds. "Caffeine is a neurotoxin," he said. "Plants produce it specifically to kill insects that try to eat them. It disrupts the nervous system, causes rapid heart rate, and in sensitive species can lead to seizures and death. The lethal dose for a Kethrani like myself would be less than 1 gram. He displayed an image of a small cup filled with dark liquid. "Humans drink this every morning. Many of them drink it multiple times throughout the day. They say they need it to function. They become irritable and unfocused without it." Elena was nodding. "Coffee. Yes, I cannot start my day without it. On Earth, we have shops on every street corner that sell nothing but coffee. People wait in long lines to get it. Some people spend more on coffee each month than they do on food." "You are addicted to a neurotoxin," the Drexy cadet said, his voice high with disbelief. "We prefer to call it a daily habit," Elena replied. "But yes, if I do not have coffee in the morning, I get headaches and I am very unpleasant to be around." Velthrix turned off the display and stood in silence for a long moment. His compound eyes moved slowly across the classroom, looking at each terrified face. Let me summarize what we have learned about humans over the past several weeks. They evolved on a planet where the air is corrosive, the water is filled with salt and acid, and the land is covered with creatures that bite, sting, and poison. In response, their bodies developed resistance to an incredible range of toxins. But they were not satisfied with simply surviving. They actively seek out these dangerous substances. They put chemical weapons on their food for flavor. They drink cellular solvents for entertainment. They consume cardiac toxins as romantic gestures. They are physically addicted to neurotoxins and become aggressive without them. He paused. And they consider all of this completely normal, unremarkable, just part of daily life. The teaching hall was silent. A Florani cadet reformed itself into a tight ball, the gel equivalent of hiding under a blanket. The Morth were staring at Elena with their 4 eyes wide open, seeing her not as a soft, clawless creature, but as something else entirely. And Elena Vasquez sat in the back row, calmly drinking from a small container of coffee she had brought from the cafeteria. "Class dismissed," Velthrix said quietly. "I need to update our threat assessment files." As the students filed out, giving Elena a very wide berth, Velthrix walked to his office and sat down heavily in his chair. He pulled up the official Confederacy Species Classification database and found the entry for humans. Class 4 Persistence Predator. It read, "Low immediate threat. Minimal natural weapons. Recommend standard caution. Protocols." He stared at the entry for a long time. Then he began typing a request for reclassification. He was not sure what class humans should be in, but he knew that Class 4 was dangerously wrong. Very dangerously wrong. The alarm came at 3 in the morning. Station time. Elena was already awake when the sirens started screaming. She had been having trouble sleeping, her body still not fully adjusted to the artificial day-night cycle of the station. She was sitting on her bunk, reading messages from home on her datapad, when the red lights began flashing and the calm voice of the station computer turned into something urgent and afraid. "Alert! Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. Unknown hostile forces boarding. All personnel report to evacuation stations immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Elena pulled on her boots and uniform in less than 30 seconds. Farm life had taught her to move fast when trouble came, and trouble on a space station was much worse than trouble in a barn. The hallways were chaos. Cadets from a dozen species ran in all directions, some toward the evacuation pods, others too panicked to remember where the pods were. Elena moved against the flow, heading toward the command center where she knew Commander Velthrix would be. She found him staring at a wall of security screens, his 6 arms moving across control panels, his compound eyes reflecting the horror of what was happening below. "Sceth," he said without looking at her. "Raiders from the deep void. They have not attacked a station this size in over a century. We were not prepared." Elena looked at the screens. The images were terrible. Creatures were moving through the lower decks, creatures unlike anything she had seen before. They had no eyes that she could see, just smooth gray heads above bodies covered in living metal that seemed to flow and shift like liquid. They had claws on their 4 arms, long and curved and dripping with something that glistened in the emergency lights. She watched a security team try to fight them. Plasma bolts hit the Sketh and did nothing, absorbed by that flowing metal skin. Then the Sketh struck back, their claws slashing through armor like it was paper. Where the claws touched flesh, the victims started screaming. They kept screaming as they fell, kept screaming as they died, their bodies twisting in ways that bodies should not twist. "The venom," Velthrix said, his voice hollow. It is why they are so feared. One scratch is death. The toxin spreads through the bloodstream in seconds. It feels like liquid fire in your veins, they say. The nerves burn out one by one. Most victims die within 2 minutes, but they are conscious and in agony for all of it. More security teams arrived on the screens. More died. The Sketh moved through them like farmers moving through wheat, cutting them down without effort, without mercy. How many on the station? Elena asked. 12,000 souls. Cadets, instructors, support staff, families. Velthrix's voice cracked. The evacuation pods cannot launch while the Sketh control the lower decks. They have blocked the release systems. Everyone is trapped. Elena watched the screens for another long moment. She saw a Drexy cadet, maybe the same one from her class, try to run. A Sketh caught him in 3 strides and opened him from shoulder to hip. She saw Florani try to hide by flattening itself into a crack in the wall. The Sketh found it anyway, dragged it out, and tore it apart. "What is the plan?" she asked. "There is no plan. Our weapons cannot hurt them. Our people cannot survive their venom. The Confederacy fleet is 4 hours away at maximum speed. We hold out or we die." Elena turned away from the screens and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Velthrix demanded. "To the armory. Did you not hear me? The venom kills in moments. One scratch and you are dead." Elena stopped at the door and looked back at him. Her dark eyes were calm, but there was something behind them now, something old and cold and patient. "I read the report on Sketh venom," she said. "Neurotoxic, hemolytic, causes rapid cellular necrosis. Symptoms include localized pain, swelling, and impaired motor function." Velthrix stared at her. That description would be for a human. For everyone else, it is simply death. "Commander, where I come from, we have snakes that can kill you in an hour. We have spiders whose bite rots your flesh. We have jellyfish that stop your heart and fish that fill you with poison. We have been swimming in venom since before we climbed down from the trees." She turned back to the door. "The Sketh think they are dangerous. They have not met a human yet." She left before he could respond. The armory was 2 levels up, and Elena ran the whole way. She passed panicking cadets and ignored them, past instructors trying to maintain order and did not stop. When she reached the armory, she found it locked and guarded by a nervous Morris security officer. "Cadet, you need to evacuate," the Morris said. "Open the armory." "I have orders to." Elena stepped forward. The Morris was 7 feet tall and made of living stone, but something in her eyes made it step back. "There are 9 humans on this station," she said quietly. 8 other cadets from Earth. We are the only species that might survive Sketh venom long enough to fight back. Open the armory, or everyone on this station dies." The Morris looked at her for a long moment. Then it stepped aside and unlocked the door. Elena moved through the armory with purpose. She took a plasma rifle, 2 sidearms, and a belt of grenades that probably would not hurt the Sketh, but might slow them down. She grabbed a tactical vest and combat armor and put them on as she walked. Then she activated her communicator. "All Terran cadets, this is Vasquez. Meet me at Junction 17, Deck 6. Full combat gear. We have work to do." The responses came in one by one. Yuki Tanaka from Japan. Marcus Cole from America. Olga Petrov from Russia. Ahmed Hassan from Egypt. Wei Lin from China. Santiago Reyes from Mexico. Fatima Assay from Ghana. James Mitchell from Australia. 9 humans from 9 different places, but they all shared the same home. A planet that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill them, and they were still here. By the time Elena reached Junction 17, the others were already there. They stood in a tight group, armed and armored, their eyes hard and ready. None of them looked scared. Growing up on Earth did not leave much room for fear. "Here is the situation," Elena said. "Scath boarding party, unknown numbers, controlling decks 7 through 12. Their venom is lethal to every species on this station except us. The fleet is 4 hours out. The evacuation systems are blocked. 12,000 people are going to die unless we stop it." Marcus Cole checked the charge on his rifle. "What is the venom like?" "Neurotoxic, hemolytic, rapid necrosis. Based on the chemical profile, it is similar to a combination of cobra and box jellyfish toxins." "That is going to hurt," Olga said flatly. "Yes, it will hurt a lot. We will probably get scratched. We will probably feel like we are dying. But we will not die, not fast enough to matter. We keep fighting until the Sketh are dead or the fleet arrives." "Questions?" There were no questions. Elena looked at each of them in turn. Yuki, who had once been stung by a hornet nest and kept running to get help for her injured friend. Marcus, whose family had lived in rattlesnake country for generations. Olga, who had fallen through ice into frozen water and climbed out on her own. Anadwe, Santiago, Fatima, James, all of them forged by Earth, hardened by a world that never stopped trying to kill them. "One more thing," Elena said. "I am allergic to bee stings. Compared to that, this should be nothing." She chambered around in her rifle and started, walking toward the lower decks. The others followed Dot in the command center. Velfrix watched them go on the security screens. 9 small figures moving through the corridors toward the sound of screaming. He had never believed in gods. But in that moment, he found himself praying to whatever might be listening that the humans would be enough. The first Sketh they encountered was alone, separated from its pack while hunting through a maintenance corridor. It turned when it heard them coming, its eyeless head swiveling toward the sound of boots on metal flooring. It raised its clawed arms, venom dripping from the curved tips, and made a sound that was probably meant to be terrifying. Elena shot it in the head. The plasma bolt did not kill it. She had not expected it to, but the impact knocked it backward, disrupting its balance, and before it could recover, Marcus and Olga were on it. They grabbed its arms, twisting them behind its back, and James Mitchell stepped forward with a blade made of hardened ceramic. The knife could not cut through the living metal skin, but it could find the gaps, the joints where the armor was thin. He stabbed 5 times in 3 seconds, and the Sketh stopped moving. "They can be killed," Elena said, looking at the body. "They are just hard to kill. Remember that. They bleed, and they die. They just need more encouragement than most." They moved on. The lower decks were a nightmare. Bodies lay everywhere, cadets and instructors and staff who had not made it to safety. The Sketh had been thorough in their butchery, but here and there, survivors huddled in locked rooms or hidden spaces, and Elena's team found them and sent them toward the upper levels. The first real battle came at the junction of decks 9 and 10. 7 Sketh were there, gathered around what looked like a communications device. They were trying to signal their ship, Elena realized, calling for reinforcements or reporting their success. She did not give them time to finish. The humans attacked as a unit, moving with the coordination of a pack of wolves. Plasma fire lit up the corridor, forcing the Sketh to scatter. Grenades exploded, not hurting them but blinding and confusing. And then the humans were among them, fighting hand-to-hand with blades and improvised weapons in pure stubborn rage. Elena took the first claw across her left arm. She felt the venom enter her bloodstream immediately, a burning cold that spread from the wound like ice water mixed with fire. Her vision blurred at the edges and her muscles began to cramp. The pain was astonishing, worse than anything she had ever felt. Worse than the time she had grabbed an electric fence as a child, or the time a centipede had bitten her foot. But she did not fall. She did not scream. She pivoted, drove her combat knife into the Sketh's neck joint, and moved to the next target, Around her, the other humans were taking wounds too. Yuki had 3 parallel slashes across her back. Ahmed was limping from a deep cut on his thigh. Wei was bleeding from a wound on her face that had just missed her eye. They were all suffering, all feeling the venom spread through their bodies, all fighting through pain that would have killed anyone else in the galaxy. But they kept fighting. The Sketh did not understand. These small, soft creatures should be dead. One scratch was supposed to be enough. Instead, the humans took scratch after scratch and kept coming, kept attacking, kept killing. The Sketh had been feared for centuries because nothing could survive their venom. Now they faced something that could, and they had no idea what to do. The battle at Deck 9 lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, 7 Sketh were dead, and all 9 humans were still standing. Barely standing, in some cases. Marcus had to lean against the wall to stay upright. Fatima was shaking so hard she could barely hold her weapon. But they were alive, and the Sketh were not. How much more? Olga asked through gritted teeth. The left side of her face was swelling from a wound on her cheek. The main force is in the docking bay on Deck 12, Elena said. Her own voice sounded strange to her, thick and slow. The venom was affecting her speech. Maybe 20 more. They control the evacuation systems from there. We can take 20, James said. He was breathing hard and his skin had taken on a grayish color, but his eyes were still sharp. We have killed 10 so far. We can kill 20 more. Elena looked at her team. They were wounded, poisoned, exhausted. Any reasonable person would have stopped, would have retreated to get medical help, would have waited for the fleet to arrive. But humans were not reasonable. They had never been reasonable. Reasonable creatures did not eat poison for fun or drink cellular solvents for relaxation, or climb the highest mountains just to say they had done. It then let us go. She said. The battle for Deck 12 took 3 hours. The humans fought room by room, corridor by corridor, pushing the Sketh back toward the docking bay. They took more wounds. Santiago went down with a claw through his shoulder and had to be dragged to safety by Fatima. Wei stopped being able to see out of her left eye. Marcus started coughing blood, but they did not stop. Elena lost track of how many times she was clawed. She lost track of how many Sketh she killed. The world narrowed to a simple loop. Find target, attack target, kill target, find next target. The venom was a constant fire in her blood, burning away everything except the need to keep moving forward. When she finally cornered the Sketh war leader in the main docking bay, she had been clawed 7 times. Her uniform was soaked with blood, some of it hers and some of it not. Her joints had swelled to twice their normal size. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. Her vision had narrowed to a small circle of clarity surrounded by darkness. The war leader was bigger than the others, its living metal skin thicker and darker. It looked at her with its eyeless head and made a sound that her translator could not process. Maybe it was a threat. Maybe it was a question. Maybe it was asking how she was still alive. Elena did not know how she was still alive. She only knew that she was, and that was enough. She raised her plasma rifle. Her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely aim. She fired anyway, again and again, driving the war leader back step by step. It swung its claws at her and she dodged, slower than before, but still fast enough. She fired until her rifle overheated. Then she threw it aside and pulled her sidearm. The war leader caught her with one final slash across her chest, cutting through her armor and into the flesh beneath. Elena felt her heart stutter, felt the venom reaching for it, felt the darkness closing in. She shot the war leader 3 times in the head at point-blank range. It fell. Elena stood over its body for a long moment, swaying on her feet. Then she reached into her medical kit and pulled out a small injector. She pressed it against her neck and triggered it. Epinephrine flooded her system. Adrenaline. It would not cure the venom, but it would keep her alive long enough for the medical teams to arrive. Her heart steadied. Her vision cleared slightly. She took a deep, painful breath. "Vasquez to command," she said into her communicator. "Docking bay secured. Evacuation systems are clear. All Sketh forces eliminated." There was a long pause before Velthrix responded. When he did, his voice was filled with something she had never heard from him before. It sounded like awe. "Understood, Cadet Vasquez. Medical teams are on their way. The fleet is now 2 hours out. You have saved 12,000 lives." Elena looked around the docking bay. Bodies lay everywhere, mostly Sketh now. Her team was scattered throughout the room, all of them down, all of them wounded, but all of them alive. Humans did not die easily. Earth had made sure of that. "Just doing our job, Commander," she said. Then she sat down heavily against the wall and closed her eyes. 3 days later, when she woke up in the medical bay with tubes in her arms and machines monitoring her vitals, she found Commander Velthrix standing beside her bed. His compound eyes studied her with an expression she could not read. "The fleet arrived and secured the station," he said. "All 9 humans survived. The medical team says it is impossible. The amount of venom in your systems should have killed you all several times over." Elena smiled weakly. "We are stubborn. You are terrifying." He paused. "I have submitted my report to the Confederacy High Command. They are reclassifying your species. No longer Class 4. They are debating between Class Omega and creating an entirely new classification just for humans." "What does Class Omega mean?" "Adaptive threat. It means do not engage. Do not provoke. If encountered, make friends and hope they stay friendly." Elena laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. Velthrix placed a data pad on the table beside her bed. "I have also added a personal note to my report. A recommendation for future interactions with humanity." She picked up the pad and read the note. It was short, just 2 sentences. "Humans are the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. For the love of the eternal stars, do not let them bring their bees." Elena read it twice, then started laughing again despite the pain. She was still laughing when the nurse came to check on her. And when the nurse asked what was so funny, Elena just shook her head and smiled. Some things were too strange to explain in the years that followed. The story of the Battle of Harmony's Promise spread across the Confederacy. Humans became known as the species that could survive anything. The creatures from the poison world who drank neurotoxins for breakfast and kept fighting no matter how many times they were hurt. Elena Vasquez was offered promotions and medals and honors that she did not want. She went back to Earth for a while, back to her grandmother's farm, where she helped with the harvest and let herself heal. Sometimes she stood in the garden and watched the bees moving from flower to flower. The same bees that had terrified an entire academy. They were just bees, she thought. Just small creatures doing what they had always.